We all know that famous saying that the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over but expecting a different result. And if we're being honest, that pretty much sums up the Spurs leadership over the last 20 plus years. But with the way we've started this summer transfer window and with some changes that were implemented during last season, are we finally witnessing some genuine change at the club? Could this be the turning point we've all been waiting for? Could this be the moment where we stop masquerading as a big club and actually start acting like one? In this video, I'm going to present the evidence so far and try to give a balanced view about the direction in which the club is heading. And at the end of the video, I'll give you my opinion on whether I think this is truly the real deal or whether it's just another false dawn. So let's get started, beginning with the summer transfer window. Now let's be honest, we're off to a pretty good start, aren't we? We're doing business very early, which is a huge departure from what we saw during the Daniel Levy years. Andy Robertson, Marcos Senesi, now Jean-Paul Van Hecke already in the bag. And in the case of Van Hecke, look, I don't think he's going to be the next Paolo Maldini, but there's two things about this transfer that really strike me as encouraging. Number one, he's clearly a player that De Zerbi has really pushed for, and that suggests to me that the manager is leading the recruitment process. And secondly, reading between the lines a little bit, the fact that we've paid well over the odds for him and that we pursued him so aggressively suggests to me that not only are they trying to give the manager the players that he wants, but also that we intend to spend a huge amount of money this summer. And the reason I think that is this. With the signings we've already made, Robertson and Senesi, and with the option of absorbing Luka Vuskovic back into the squad after his loan spell in Germany, if there was only limited funds available for players and De Zerbi was well aware of the limitations, would he really have pushed this hard for another centre-half, bearing in mind the other areas of the first 11 we need to improve? There appears to be really concrete interest in not only Savinho, but also now Sandro Tonali, who Newcastle are valuing at around 90 million quid. If all three of those deals go through, Van Hecke, Savinho, Tonali, that's well north of 200 million quid in transfer fees, and we still need to improve other areas of the team with players that are going to cost a lot of money. What's also encouraging is that players like Tonali are at the very top end of players that we can realistically look to attract. We've got no European football next season, and after two 17th place finishes, our reputation is at a pretty low ebb. Even if we sign all of those players I mentioned, I think we still probably need a backup goalkeeper, two defensive midfielders and a new striker. Those players alone, if we're going to bring in players of quality, again are going to cost another 250 million quid. And if we don't address those areas of the team, we won't be competitive next season. And that's something De Zerbi just won't stand for. We know that he left Brighton largely due to the fact that they weren't prepared to pay the money for the players he wanted. And so if we don't give him at least 75 to 80% of what he truly wants this summer, he won't stick around for long. And for all the bold shortcomings, I don't think even those guys are stupid enough to let that happen. However, I said I'd provide some balance, and the fact is, we actually have to get those players through the door first. It's very easy to identify targets, especially ones like Tonali, but getting them to actually sign on the dotted line is another matter altogether. And also, even if we were to sign Van Hecke, Savinho and Tonali, we're still pretty short of what we need to be competitive. And also, I know the transfer window has only just opened, but we're still very much in the dark about outgoings. We don't know who's going to leave the club and how much we're going to sell them for. And those decisions will largely inform us about the areas of the team that we'll look to improve immediately. The second encouraging sign that began last year is that we're now beginning to pay our players really competitive salaries. And very quickly, guys, if you're new to the channel, it would really help me out if you thought about subscribing, dropping a like, dropping a comment, maybe doing all three. Thanks very much. For many years under Levy, we scrimped and saved on salaries, and we've allowed that gap between us and the Premier League elite to become too large. Simon Jordan of TalkSport, who's very close to Daniel Levy, mentioned this the other day when talking about Spurs. Take a look.
It's been about the wages. The wages are the issue that Tottenham Hotspur have found themselves falling foul of because they won't adjust their wage parameters, because they've got banking covenants that support their borrowings. So I never felt for one moment that these guys wouldn't spend more money.
Now, I know that Simon Jordan is packaged up to us as this kind of fountain of all football knowledge. And to be fair, I am a fan of his in many ways, but on this one, I think he's a bit behind the curve. There is a recognised correlation between outlay on player salaries and success in the Premier League. And so the fact we're becoming more competitive is a huge step in the right direction. Christian Romero signed his new deal in August 25, taking his weekly wage packet to 195 grand a week. For context, Gabriel over at Arsenal reportedly earns 150 grand a week. So know not only we're competitive, but in Romero's case, we're probably overpaying. We're reportedly paying Conor Gallagher 160 grand a week basic with the option to top it up to 200 grand a week with goal bonuses, appearance bonuses and assist bonuses. And again, for some context, Enzo Fernandez reportedly earns 180 grand a week at Chelsea and Dominic Szoboszlai at Liverpool earns 120 grand a week. Again, you can see that our salaries are now starting to become competitive with the teams at the higher end of the table. Summer signings Xavi Simons and Mohamed Kudus are on 200 grand a week and 150 grand a week respectively. Pedro Porro's just signed a new deal, which is almost certainly north of 100 grand a week. And again, for context, Jurrien Timber over at Arsenal reportedly earns 90 grand a week. Now, the actual outlay on salaries is very encouraging, but again, for balance, does the fact that we're paying big weekly salaries to players like Christian Romero and Conor Gallagher point to a bit of a problem in our technical department? I would say yes. In Gallagher's case, although his commitment, his desire, his will to win are traits that I've come to admire in him, as a technical footballer and ability-wise, he's very middle of the road in Premier League terms, and so paying him a salary comparable to someone like Enzo Fernandez seems a bit misguided considering the gap in quality. And in Romero's case, in my opinion, his attitude has always been in question, and so rather than giving him a new deal on improved terms at 195 grand a week, surely the shortcomings in his attitude should have been recognised, and the technical department should not only be looking at ability but be looking at personality traits as well. Also, because we've historically paid lower salaries over the years and when we sign new players, that can create tension in the squad. Just for example, Rodrigo Bentancur reportedly earns 75 grand a week at Spurs. And so if you're paying Conor Gallagher 160 grand a week, that's a bit of a problem. I think we can all agree that our injury record over the last 2 years has been nothing short of absolutely horrific. But in fairness to the club, towards the end of last season, they made some moves to try and address the problem. We've revamped the medical department and we've brought in a new performance director, a guy called Dan Lewington from the City Group. And towards the back end of last season, Lewington conducted comprehensive testing of every single medical process, the recovery, the training schedules, even the surfaces the boys are playing on. Now, obviously I can't comment too much on how good or bad this is or how good or bad these new staff are, because I know absolutely fuck all about medicine. But from the outside looking in, you have to say it's a positive move that the club has looked to address a problem that has been a real Achilles heel for the last couple of years. But again, for some balance, what we don't want to see now with all these new guys coming in and this new performance director is an overreach from the medical staff. We know that one of the reasons Enzo Maresca left Chelsea last season was because the medical team were essentially driving his team selection and kind of overreaching into areas they weren't welcome. Obviously their input will be valuable, but as long as they're there just to support Roberto De Zerbi, I think that's probably a good thing. Lastly, and it's a very obvious one, but whoever was responsible, the board or the sporting director, for appointing Roberto De Zerbi deserves a huge amount of credit. If you remember at the time, there was a deafening clamour from the Spurs fans for a club man, someone like Harry Redknapp or Tim Sherwood or Ryan Mason. I myself made a video saying that I thought Harry Redknapp was the only man that could get us out of trouble because I just didn't think there was a chance in hell of getting a manager of Roberto De Zerbi's calibre in the situation we were in. But to their credit, the board ignored the outside noise, aggressively pursued De Zerbi, and when they got him to sign on the dotted line, they made him the third highest paid manager in the league behind Pep Guardiola and the Spanish Lego head at Arsenal. And the rest is history. And you know what? I'm a big believer in giving credit where credit is due. And in the case of appointing De Zerbi, there's a huge amount of credit due there. However, and again for balance, you could say from a different perspective that De Zerbi had us over an absolute barrel when it came to negotiations. Due to the situation we were in, he could pretty much name his price. And also, it was a win-win situation for him. If we had got relegated, he could use the excuse that he didn't have enough time, couldn't bring his own players in, etc, etc. But on the other hand, if he did manage to avoid relegation, which he eventually did, he ends up in charge of one of England's biggest clubs and on a massive, massive salary. Now, taking all that into account, my opinion is this. We simply can't judge whether we've reached a true turning point after one transfer window or even after one full calendar year. We'll need to see evidence over the next 2 or 3 years of continued investment and spending on really quality players to make a true judgment about which direction the club is headed. Yes, there are encouraging signs so far, but this leadership group has absolutely zero credibility, and so they need to put their money where their mouth is. But honestly, I feel like this summer we need to go out and spend 300 to 400 million quid on quality players, do the same again next summer, maybe 200 million quid on 1 or 2, maybe 3 quality players, and do the same again the year after that. It's the only way to get us back to where we think we should be. And make no mistake, if we give this manager exactly what he wants in terms of players and resources, I genuinely think that in the next 2 or 3 years, we'll be contenders for the big trophies and the big honours. In terms of the injury record, we'll need to see over the next year or two whether that improves and whether the new medical staff have done anything to change that. But again, it's just too early to tell. In summary, the signs are very positive, but transforming us from the position we're in now to where we think we should be is going to take time, patience, and a hell of a lot of money. As always, let me know what you guys think. I really love reading and responding to your comments. And until the next video, thanks for watching.